CEE
Central Europe Explained,
an IDM podcast series
powered by Erste Group.
Episode 10, Becoming an EU Member, Part 2, with Katalin-Tünde Huber and Ambassador Klaus Wölfer. Hello and welcome back in CEE, Central Europe Explained. My name is Sebastian Schäffer. I'm Managing Director at the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe in Vienna. In our last episode, we discussed the latest European enlargement in 2007 and 2013 and the lessons learned. Going further, we will today focus on opportunities and challenges of European enlargement for Southeast European countries and then look at the future perspectives and upcoming changes in the region. Therefore, I'm very glad to welcome two EU enlargement specialists to share with us their expertise on the following topic. With me, I have Katalin-Tünde Huber, Head of the Unit EU Enlargement at the Ministry for Europe and International Affairs, and Ambassador Klaus Wölfer, Head of the Department for Southeast Europe and EU Enlargement, as well as Special Representative for the Western Balkans at the Federal Ministry for Europe and International Affairs. Ambassador Wölfer is also a member of the board of IDM. Hello and welcome to CEE. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello.
Hello, thank you.
To begin with, I would like to start with a very basic question and ask you, what does accessing the EU mean for the Southeastern European countries?
If I can start, it's the basic orientation in the foreign policy, at least this is what is being professed by each and every one. And seen from our European point of view, it has been a decisive factor also of stabilization, of bringing our value system and our economic system to this part of Europe, which is, by the way, surrounded by EU member states. Therefore, it is very logical also to fulfill the promise of European unification, which has been given decades ago, and which obviously should apply to each country of the European Union if they wish so. This has been stated in Thessaloniki some years ago in 2003 and restated over again, and has been a basic tenet in the foreign policy of all 6 countries in question. The framework and where we are, there are some countries with ongoing membership accession negotiations, some waiting to enter that stage, others a little bit further away, but all basically directed towards the European Union.
If I may add, Ambassador Wölfer used a very nice word, orientation. It's their basic orientation. I think you used the word because you wanted to avoid the word of European perspective, which has become a bit of a political phrase and nobody knows what the content really is at the moment. So I think orientation is the right way to describe it. And more concretely, I think it's really also the driving, and still it's the driving force in the countries, the main driving force for political reforms, for economic reforms, the main carrot also for positive pro-European development.
If we continue from there, what are the challenges that lie underneath for these countries, especially regarding their socio-political backgrounds, economic synchronization, democratization, rule of law, and anti-corruption policies?
Well, there's still a big gap between mainstream European Union countries and accession countries in the field of all the subjects that you mentioned. Maybe the economic gap is the one which is the most difficult to catch up quickly, because it's long-term development, it's years of a lack of adequate investments, foreign investments, a lack of inclusion into the transportation and economic currents of Europe. If you don't have suitable train links between countries of the Western Balkans and the European Union countries, you cannot fix this within a few months. You need long-term planning. So this is a major thing. I'm leaving out the rule of law and democracy thing, which is also, of course, a long-term project, but progress can be rather quickly if you have a change of orientation, a basic change of orientation of the leading politicians, then things can turn better quickly, as we have seen in the case of North Macedonia. There, a couple of years ago, there was occupation of parliament and very undemocratic moves by politicians, police, and everything. This has basically turned around, and we have witnessed in the past years a very encouraging and positive development in North Macedonia, also in Albania. I think the turnaround was biggest and most drastic in what is today called North Macedonia. And incidentally, even the name changed over these years of profound transformation.
If I may add a point, Ambassador Wölfer mentioned rule of law, and I'm of your view that, if the political top level changes, then that of course has a very important impact on the countries and the societies. But at the same time, I think to really change mentalities on every level of society regarding accepting democratic institutions, the rule of law, anti-corruption measures, I think that's also quite a long process. And EU member states have also demanded more progress in this field. And now in the next couple of years, the focus will very much lie on positive developments and reforms in the area of rule of law and anti-corruption, democratic institutions. So that's where EU member states will put a special focus on.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Huber, if I may continue here, Ambassador Wölfer has said that certain reforms take a certain period of time, especially when you need to build infrastructure that makes sense. But nevertheless, we also heard that this promise at the summit in Thessaloniki was given in 2003. So there is a lot of time that has already passed. Now, in our last episode, Mihai Razvan Ungureanu said that after the accession of Croatia, it was a turning point, that the transformative power of Europe, the European Union, ended. He also said that the accession gates were closed for whatever was left east of Poland and Romania. And when we take this into account, what will your evaluation be of the lessons learned after the last accession of Croatia? It already passed almost 8 years again. And is this something that hinders the new accession? Or is this something that the process influences at the moment?
Well, I think the enthusiasm for enlargement has in general decreased a little bit, or the appetite of EU member states for enlargement. And I think the main problem is not with the candidate countries or future candidate countries, but with the EU itself, that we see that there are stumbling blocks in order to be able to take decisions. We have unanimity in very important fields, so it's very difficult sometimes to reach a decision. The EU urgently needs reforms in various areas, and I think there are so many challenges also at the moment. It all started with the economic and financial crisis, continued with Brexit, which has been a huge challenge and had an impact on the remaining member states. So I think there are questions the EU has to deal with, and that's what member states mainly worry about, before taking up new members. And so I think that's the main point, and not the view about these future, hopefully, EU member states.
Ambassador Wölfer, what do you think?
I fully agree. Plus, there is, of course, the aftermath of the world economic crisis of 2008-9. So there was sort of a more cautious attitude by many when it comes to more and future, also financial engagements that may play a role. And of course, there is a high degree of reluctance to import problems into the European Union. I think the Cyprus issue was quite an eye-opener. There's just no point in accepting new countries that bring with them major unresolved international disputes. That is also a thing. And then, of course, the Balkans, unfortunately, has this reputation with some of being unwieldy, somehow strange and different and not quite easy to control, which for us in Central Europe, I think is different, because we have a good knowledge over centuries of this region and don't see it as anything exotic. It's just, it's the neighbors. They have problems, there are wars there, but there have been wars. There have been worse wars in Central, Northern, Western Europe. So I think this is already an important distinction to a certain extent of attitudes towards the area, which we see even now in the daily debates about how to go about with the accession bids by the various countries.
Ambassador Wölfer, if we talk about the enlargement process, there are the Copenhagen criteria that candidate countries need to fulfill. This is something that has been introduced in 1993. Before that, there were not this set of catalogue that were checked before a country was allowed to join the European Union. Is this actually still something that is used maybe as a point to prolong the process? Or rather, I think Mihai also characterized it as a kind of fictional ideal that nobody fully can achieve anyways. So how important are the Copenhagen criteria in actually becoming ready to join the European Union?
Yes, I think we need to strike a balance. Of course, we have to take it seriously. What we have decided has to be taken seriously and to be applied. But of course, with a view, with a certain sense of realism, and on the one hand. But above all, we should not throw away in the process our geopolitical senses. When Spain and Portugal or Greece were accepted in the European Union, there was a clear sense among the EU members of then that this is in the long-term, basic, fundamental interest of the European Union. And bold decisions were taken. And we think that in the case of the 6 countries surrounded by EU member states on top of everything, we should also not neglect this geopolitical aspect. We have no time to lose. The world is shaping up, and the world regions are shaping up. We have the competition between the United States and China. Other players are coming in. There are huge countries having their voices heard from Brazil, Nigeria, Indonesia, Southeast Asia, Japan. In this international context, we Europeans need to get organized and should not be held back by rather minor issue. We should apply a geopolitical measure, a geopolitical viewpoint at least.
Ms. Huber, the Copenhagen criteria, how important are they still?
Yes, if I may add, I, of course, fully agree with what Ambassador Wölfer just said, and I think that's a very important point. The EU has to sort of refocus on. I'm following the enlargement negotiations on technical level in Brussels. So there is full concentration on the Copenhagen criteria, on the EU acquis. It's getting more and more complicated, technical. The EU requests more details than ever before even starting accession negotiations. The screening process before the accession negotiations becomes more complex. So member states have a huge creativity when it comes to, thinking of all these technical points that have to be implemented by the candidate countries. And at the same time, we are totally lacking a discussion on what Ambassador Wölfer just said, the geopolitical perspective and where the EU stands and what our interests should be. And I think that's something, especially after the very difficult year 2020, where the EU was not in a position to reach an agreement on the topic of enlargement. So I think now we have to refocus on where we stand and what we really want to achieve.
If I may follow up with this, why do you think that the member states are becoming more and more technical and demand more and more? Because when we would look at them, maybe one or the other is not fulfilling the Copenhagen criteria completely themselves.
If I may start, well, I think on the one side, yes, not all EU member states might fulfill all the criteria. That's, of course, also one reason for refocusing and sort of becoming stricter. On the other side, we have this sort of the best pupils in class, like some maybe Scandinavian countries, who just want to demonstrate which areas are very, very important for them. At the same time, yes, of course, making it more complicated means also that it takes more time and takes longer. And at the end of the day, that might also be the reason for some member states.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador Wölfer? Would you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, we have come now to a point where it's really quite long drawn, the whole accession process, to put it very politely. I mean, it took Croatia, 8 years or so from beginning to the end. And here we have now, in the case of Montenegro, we have 3 chapters closed within 8 years or so. I mean, the comparison just doesn't fit. And as we rattle along this bumpy road, question marks.
Maybe just to add, I mean, if we talk about the Copenhagen criteria, it's not only the democratic institutions and not only the readiness to participate in the single market, but it's also taken over the acquis communautaire. And this includes a lot of directives and regulations that not even each and every member state fully can maybe even fulfill. So it's not only talking about the political or economical criteria, but it's also a very technical process when we look at all these different directives and regulations that are set in place, which at a certain point makes sense when we want to have not only an economic community. But when we talk about the existing member states, I would like to change a little bit the perspectives. How does the process also impact the old, so to say, member states? And is this enlargement something that brings additional challenges like fostering Euroscepticism, because it's some sort of we are better than the others and we want to preserve what we have achieved? Do you experience something like this in the old EU member countries versus newer EU member countries and also potential candidate countries? Ambassador Wölfer, maybe if you want to start.
I'm not too worried about that. Also because of the neighbors of the region, they are normally all very much in favor of accession of the Western Balkan 6 countries. And we have success stories. I mentioned North Macedonia, but North Macedonia became possible and the success became really big after they had agreed with Greece to resolve their lingering issues, which had been there for decades, actually. Question of the sheer name of that country. And there was a school book case of how to resolve an issue between these 2 countries, Athens and Skopje. They had really made up their minds. And with this view of Macedonia, North Macedonia joining the European Union in the end, they made up their mind to resolve these issues. And it was top down. It was the prime ministers and the foreign ministers, but also from on the ground level, they changed, did reforms, they changed the name of airports, did all kind of confidence building measures just to make it possible to open the road for what is today called North Macedonia to proceed on that path. And actually, there is a group within a big group within EU member states called Tallinn Group, because years ago it was founded in Tallinn, Estonia, that make a point of promoting the accession of the accession process to the European Union, especially among the newly acceding countries to the European Union. There's a very positive attitude towards the 6 joining, which is not automatic. After all, they would be recipients of aid from the European cohesion funds, which would theoretically or practically reduce the financial resources that are dished out to countries like Poland, Hungary, Romania, and so on. But still, there is a positive attitude, which is all very encouraging. Even more so, it is worrying, extremely worrying, that for not clear reasons, basically nationalistic considerations of domestic politics, this process is now stalled again regarding North Macedonia and Albania, which is a pity, and we hope that this will be overcome soon. There will be elections soon in Bulgaria, and we hope that with goodwill on both sides, these issues can be resolved and the process can again gain steam.
Thank you. Ms. Huber, do you see it from the more bottom-up approach, something that this is a challenge, that this has the potential to foster Euroscepticism? If this top-down process is something that is maybe a bit hard to explain to the people in the member countries and potential member countries?
Well, I think in general, yes, and we have seen this with the previous enlargement rounds, that there was huge skepticism in all the member states, including Austria. But I think at the moment, there are so many other topics, started sort of with the economic crisis, the migration crisis, Brexit, and now, of course, the COVID pandemic. So people have other thoughts and worries, and enlargement is actually no topic at all in the public debate. So that's something I think that's currently happening in Brussels. But it's not discussed in the public sphere. So that's why at the moment I would say it's not fostering skepticism, but of course I think this could come up again when sort of the situation normalizes again in member states and accession might come closer of certain countries. But here it's always important to inform people. That's what we learned with the last enlargement round. Information that, put everything in perspective. And I think that will be for the near future also an important topic with the member states.
Thank you very much. I think at this point, this is a very good opportunity to end our first part of this episode before we continue with the second part. So I would like to say thank you very much for this discussion to Ambassador Klaus Wölfer and to Envoy Katalin-Tünde Huber. This was CEE Central Europe Explained, Becoming an EU Member, an IDM podcast series powered by Erste Group. And we are looking forward to the second part of this episode. Thank you very much.
IDM Podcast.
Institut für den Donauraum und Mitteleuropa.
Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe.
European Perspectives.
Regional Actions.
Cooperation and expertise since 1953.